It is 4 p.m., so I'm going to call the Committee on Public Safety for December 10th, 2024 to order. Let the record reflect that Councilman Spatafor is out sick. So that takes us to our minutes.
I move to accept the November 26, 2024 minutes as presented.
Proper motion is in place. Hearing no further discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 2-0. All right, next we are on to 4, public comment on agenda items. It looks like everybody is here for a reason. So we will slide past that and move right into our discussion action. The first thing that is going to come up is orders to make safe or demolish of 122 South Grand Avenue, commonly known as the Walter Neller Building. So how we'll do this, I believe someone is here from the company. Yep. So we're going to have code compliance just kind of do a high-level overview of this, and then you will have a chance to speak as well.
Thank you. Well, unless you'd like us to go through the whole timeline, or kind of just more any sort of report on anything recent, if anything?
I would say anything recent and just a quick scattering over the facts.
Sure. So it's I don't have it right directly in front of me, but it's certainly been red tag for some time. And so it's been making its way through the MST process. As you all know, you had Chokas hearing at your previous council meeting. It was the second one, just as a clerical error on our part, so I appreciate you holding it again. Ultimately, though, when we testified in front of this had the building official providing testimony due to the unsafe nature, and we'll speak for the property representative, but I think you'll hear from her that they agree. And now it's a matter of trying to coordinate plans to have the building torn down. I'll certainly defer to her to speak to ownership's plans, the timeline, and so forth. From our end, since we reported out and met with you last at committee, there hasn't been any recent permit activity. Nothing's been applied for. We have met, the department has met with Lindsay and team twice now on the property, both in terms of future plans, but also in terms of how that may coordinate with any demolition activity. Again, I'll let her speak to some of those specifics. But at our point, or in our position as of today, I can't report out to you that anything, no building permit has been issued, no demo permit has been applied for or issued. So at this time, we would still urge that we proceed forward with an order to make safer tomorrow. Not fire damaged, so due to that, if it goes to full council and it pass, I believe it would be a 60-day.
And I believe the resolution right now, I don't have it in front of me, but 30.
I think that would need to be corrected.
Corrected to 60.
Could be 60 then?
Should be.
Okay.
Just based on the findings of the hearing officer. And it's not fire damaged.
Okay. All right. So, ma'am, would you, for the record, can you just tell us your name and then?
Yes, my name is Lindsay LeBlanc. I'm the Director of Development for Granger Group for the parent company. I was here a few weeks ago and met with all of you. So the progress that we've made so far, we have a contract.
Lindsay, I'm sorry. If you could just move maybe up here closer, because we moved the microphone. So we're trying to get, we're having either side's fine.
Okay.
We're having a hard time online getting to hear people because of the fans.
I didn't realize this is, okay.
These things don't work anymore.
So that,
No.
no, they don't work. It's the microphones there.
Yeah.
In the speaker.
We're learning. It's new technology.
All
Thank you.
right.
Thank you for that.
No problem. Again, my name is Lindsay LeBlanc. I'm the Director of Development for Granger Group. We're the parent company that owns the Walter Neller Building. We met a couple weeks ago, and at that meeting, we concur that the building at this point, there's no salvaging it, which is hence why it's been sitting vacant for as long as it has. Over the years, we've had development plans that have fallen through, and then with COVID, sort of the exodus of Lansing, there really hasn't been a lot of an appetite for us to do something, but we understand that we're now against a deadline to get this building down. We had applied for the 10-day notice for the abatement. The contract, which I have a copy of it here if you would like to see, is sitting with our CEO for signature. We just ran into two snags that we are working through to make sure that we're all on the same page. And one of them I would like to bring up at this meeting because I know that the city attorney is here. So we have evaluated all different ways to demo this. The biggest cost for us is taking out, let me back up. We don't want to, it's a highly valuable piece of property, so we obviously don't want to demo this building and just have it sit vacant or have the property sit there. If we're going to invest money, we're going to turn around and do a project. We did meet with the Brownfield Authority. We're hoping to meet with them in the second week in January, which I'll be scheduling that meeting, where we have an actual plan that we want to review of what we plan to do. And it's going to be kind of in line with what Downtown Lansing Inc. came up with. So a 3 to 4 story retail on the first floor and then residential. So with that being said, we are planning on backing this up with a project. We understand that the building can't stay up until then, and we've already worked through understanding that you can backdate some of those demo costs into the brownfield plan, which is great. But the biggest cost in the demolition is taking out the existing foundations. We would like to ask for some sort of waiver and extension on that. So to take down the building as itself, come back in, fill the hole until our project occurs. I do have a timeline for that. It really, realistically, at this point, between the brownfield approval and just development itself, we wouldn't be starting construction on that project until at the earliest October to December of 2025. So it would be a year-long waiver that we would request. One thing we mentioned there at the meeting with Raleigh and, sorry, I can't remember his name, Chris, was that maybe we could put a bond up, right, to ensure that at some point, if we don't do a project, we still are responsible for taking out the foundations. I understand that's maybe something the city of Lansing has not.
Fine. Sure. I'll at least, I'll give some background, maybe adding into why this question is coming up from our perspective. For Craig and Lisa, to the extent they want to add to it, but both of you two know our demolition standards require foundations to be removed and then the whole to be infilled unless there's an immediate plan to do to be built. So, knowing that the Grangers don't have a plan for what's going to be built. In this case, where the property is located, it's likely based on the structural engineering report we've received from them that removal of the foundation will compromise right away. And again, our demolition standards not only cite under demolition that you have to remove foundation. If you compromise right away, you also then have to replace like you do. And so I understand from the developer's perspective, if you don't have an immediate plan to develop immediately after, yes, those are added holding costs. There was a request to potentially fence in the hole for a period of time. The best we could offer and work with them is a 30 to 60-day period if there was a pending plan review for something newly to be built. It doesn't sound like that timing will. So to Lindsay's point, the second request was then to keep foundation, infill, but knowing that that would not comply with our demolition standards, could they put up a bond, meaning if at some point a period of agreed time, if they don't do something, we can then go against that bond and use that bond money to then ourselves as a city act upon it. So at that time, our office and city attorney's office met and if we can research it.
Sure.
Pause and fun.
Sure. And I'll say at this point, there's no, right, Raleigh made me aware of this discussion. There's not, we're kind of stuck with the language that we've got both in the law and in the ultimate resolution of the council. I mean, it's the legislative act by the council that says make safe or demolish. And it doesn't say make safe or demolish mostly and then do this other thing over here. So there's no obvious legal basis to have a bond or any kind of sort of, I don't know, abeyance, if that's the right word, for the final step. But so to some extent, it would have to be something that, and then that's the next part that I'll be honest, I have not fully looked into is, could the council, by including its resolution, some sort of statement of abeyance as it relates to this component, if the rest of it is made safe? Or rather, if the surface portion of it is no longer dangerous to be near or on. And cursory review when I looked at it at the time and then determined I need to dig more in this. It's never been done, as far as I can tell, or it's never been done and then somebody sued about it, so that I can read about it after the fact. So that's kind of where we are, but ultimately it would require, I mean, just so that you're all aware, it would require some kind of acknowledgement by the council. It's not a thing that we could just do administratively after we've gotten the resolution to make safe or demolish.
It's a significant, just from the developer standpoint, it's a significant cost difference. To take out the foundations is more than it would be just to abate the building and demo it. And a large amount of those costs comes from ripping up the sidewalk and the street and all of the permits required for that.
Sure.
If we are going to, which not if, when, we come in and put a new building, we're going to have to do, that building needs foundations too. So at that point, we're gonna have site work then as well. So it would be more cost effective for us to do that all at one time than to separate out the work, right? Remove the demolition, the current foundations and then come back in with new ones. So we would love if this city would be willing to work with us on some sort of, time frame to get us to, so we have we are working on the plan. It's definitely something that we have to do because that's a cost savings for us to do the one project.
Greg, if they were to tear down the upper
Surface.
structure,
Sure.
surface of it, and just, leave that foundation on their own before a 60-day make safe or demolish order was hit, would that be considered in compliance?
Go ahead.
Sorry, maybe it's Raleigh.
And maybe
It's both.
From building safety standpoint, no. Because again, following demolition standards set forth by state, removal of foundation is required. And so our building inspector, where the demo permits fall under in terms of authority, whether it's a junior inspector or the trade chief, would not be able to final out that permit. And that's the standard we use to, at the end of that 60-day mark, is we look to see if it's been made safe. Made safe is habitable for occupancy, and then demolished is certainly a demolition permit pulled and actively under demo, and then ultimately final out. So the trouble we would run into is I would find myself, whether it's at that 60-day marker at some point, after fact, we wouldn't be able to final it out. So then we would be put into a position of having to struggle with the question of, do we need to now come in and enter the property to remove said foundation if this is the case?
I heard highly valuable property, and my concern is the property has been sitting like that for 20 years. It can't be that valuable if it's been sitting like this until we put feet to the fire. All due respect. This has been just a eyesore on this city for multiple decades. I personally feel strongly that we should move forward with a 60-day make safe or demolish. I think that I understand that you have plans, and I understand all the things that you explained, but at some point we've got to sever this deal here. My job is not to play out for the next year what could be. It's to get this building down that's dangerous, that should have been down years ago.
We are taking the building down.
Sure.
The only thing that'll remain is the foundations, and we are agreeable to a bond, obviously reasonable, that guarantees that if in a year, which is a reasonable development timeline, that is, and we're trying to push it at that point, that if we don't take it out or we don't build something at that point, either we come in and take out the foundations or the city has the money to do so.
And I appreciate all that, Lindsay, but why did we do this 2 years ago, 3 years ago?
I
4
wasn't
years
a part
ago?
of the company 2, 3, 4 years ago. I've only been with the company a year and a half
Sure.
at this point.
And I'm looking at the big picture here personally, but
I do have a few
Yes.
questions. So tearing down from what I'm just kind of recapping what you just said,
Sure.
just a lot of information. So tearing down the upper portion of the building without the foundation, I mean, that goes against state complying with state law, is that correct?
Correct.
So that's not an option. And then my next question is, and I'm sorry if I missed this earlier in the conversation, is there a reason that you cannot fulfill all of this work sooner rather than later?
It's not that we can't fulfill it. It's not that we can't take the foundations out. That's certainly doable. It's the cost of taking them out and then turning around to put up a new building and having to tear the sidewalks and the streets back out twice. So we would be doing that work twice. It would be better for us financially to streamline that work. So we're asking for the city to work with us in that endeavor. So it's quite costly from the quotes I've gotten to take down to abate the building and take the building down itself is about $500,000. To take out the foundations, to backfill, all of that is an additional $700,000 on top of the 500. So it's just significant cost barrier for us. My company has ties to Lansing. This building was bequeathed to the owner from his father. So there's a lot of emotional tie here. If he's going to do something, he wants to do something great, not just put up any old little building. The meeting that we had with Downtown Lansing Inc. provided some really great ideas that he's excited about. So I understand it's been an eyesore. We have worked with the city. We put up murals, but it's not just something we want to tear down to put up, a meaningless piece of a building. It's something they want to do that's significant. So yes, there's two ends to that thread of, well, we've let it sit vacant forever. So what's it now? Well, you're right. Feed her to the fire. So we're going to do something, but we're not going to do something meaningless. So we ask that the city work with us in this. It's a year-long process. Unfortunately, that's where we're at. I think it's a very reasonable request on our part to bring something neat to the city.
I struggle with it taking yet another year, understanding good intentions and all of that routinely when we have, been homeowners who come in and we're telling them that we're not going to hold up the process for a home that they could, that they would like to find the means to fix up and things like that. Here we're dealing with something that has been on this list for, well over a decade. It is in disrepair. It does need to come down. I wouldn't feel comfortable with the fact that there's no legal basis for a bond or to hold this in abeyance, as OCA has said. And I would follow the recommendation of ED&P to move this forward, so that we can just continue the process.
Can I just say one more thing? But it will be safe for the year intermediate, right? There won't be a structure there. It'll be gravel. There won't be anything that is not safe. I understand that that's what the law says, that the foundations have to come out during the entire demolition process, but in that intervening time, it will be safe. There won't be a building there for anyone to get hurt in. So it's not like I'm asking you to keep the building up for a year. With the hazard of someone getting in it and getting hurt, it'll be crushed stone or grass, if that's what you would prefer, in that intervening time between when we take the building down and when we start construction on something new. So I just want to make sure you understand that we are going to make it safe in the very immediate future. The only request is the foundations, which will be buried under the ground.
And I appreciate that, Lindsay. I would say this. One, I just went past the building and some of those boards, those murals are already missing because they've been up there for 3 years and they're weathered. That tells me right there that this building does not matter that much. Two, when I spoke to the CEO of your company back when we were talking about the city hall, he had mentioned how quickly they were able to get up the house building. So, if they can quickly get that building up, I'm sure we can do something to race against the clock for this. Third, I think that it would be not doing our due diligence. If we sat on this property, which is one of the worst in Lansing, and has been for some time, the conditions are dangerous. I mean, we have windows falling out onto the sidewalk. I understand that you're gonna cover it with gravel or something like that. But, you know, we have to make sure that we're making the right decision for the citizens of Lansing. And it sounds like, you know, it's gonna be expensive, and I get that it's gonna be expensive. And if we tear down that foundation, you lose out on a lot of those brownfield dollars, to make it less expensive. But, you know, that building has cost us so much business downtown of companies not wanting to come here because, you know, we have eyesores, downtown, that I can't just keep letting it sit there like this in good conscience. And I understand your point of view. I get it. But, you know, what we're here to do is looking at this dangerous building that has been like this. I mean, we're talking 2016, probably earlier than that it's been in that shape, and unusable. So.
One last question for OCA. Hypothetically, if we were inclined to move forward with some type of bond situation, allowing this plan to go through and hold on for the year, that would open us up to other companies with other buildings in the future that may be enticed to do something similar, or is that
Sure.
not necessarily the case?
It being a thing that there's no process for at law already, it would absolutely be it would be an exercise of discretion. That would also be, I mean, yeah, it would be precedential.
I don't want to set this as a standard.
Sure.
And I will admit that.
So we would need a motion, with an amended resolution, for 60 days.
I move the amended resolution to make safe or demolish 122 South Grand Avenue within 60 days.
Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes 2-0. This will be on, for Monday night, City Council, the 16th. So you are welcome to come then, and speak, before we make our vote.
Okay,
Okay?
thank you.
Thank you. Next, we're going to move on to discussion item C, which is the littering ordinance. OCA, I had a conversation with Greg about littering ordinance here in the city, and the changes to the state law. So I asked if he would be here, and he did come to discuss some of the changes, and if we can in fact make any changes, do an overview of this ordinance, because litter's been a problem in this city. We know it is.
So I'll start by saying, unfortunately, the changes to the state law don't directly benefit Lansing, and or we can't adopt those by reference or adopt them independent of by reference. There was a change in this year to, it's a section of the Natural Resources and Environmental Protection Act of the state of Michigan, NREPA. That is one of the statutory, very large chapter, but or very large act, I'll say. It contains a number of criminal prohibitions and other prohibitions that for which the penalty is criminal. None of those are ones that the city through ordinance gets to enforce. There are state laws that we are explicitly allowed to adopt by reference. So we've adopted in almost all of the motor vehicle code, for example, and there's the uniform traffic code that we've adopted by reference. We have an ordinance adopting it, including penalty provisions. So we don't have like a section of our criminal code of ordinances that enforces or that prohibits those things. NREPA does not contain a "you can adopt this by reference" section. So that's one hit. The other is that we are allowed to pass ordinances, criminal ordinances that are actually comparable to state ordinances, but only if the state ordinance is punished by no more than 93 days as a misdemeanor and no more than $500 for the fine penalty of the misdemeanor. The section that was modified under the NRAPA is already way beyond that. So like a first time with, I think, 1 to 3 cubic feet is an $800 fine.
Yep.
And then it goes up and it gets exponentially much larger. I think it becomes a felony at a certain point, given based on the volume. That law does apply in Lansing, and Lansing police could arrest under that law, but our office can't prosecute that. It would have to go to Eaton County for charges to be issued, or Eaton County. And then it would be with that prosecutor's office for enforcement. So that's sort of the basics. And then similarly, under the Home Rule City Act, any criminal ordinance that we have, we are capped at a $500 fine.
Okay.
Under our framework. We're not allowed to have more than that. There's one really small exception to those limitations, and that is by statute, we have a very specific carve out to adopt and enforce somebody who is driving drunk with a high BAC because it exceeds some of those parameters. And that was for first offense that was explicitly granted by state that we can do that. And it's one of those notwithstanding any other statute kind of thing. So that's the only exception. So there's not really anything that we can do modify our ordinances, but again, as described, this is very much still in effect because it isn't just on state land or I'll say sort of free undeveloped land. It applies in public and private places in the state of Michigan.
So I guess my first question would definitely be, how do we, as someone who has, I'll say it again, but everybody knows it. You know, I spent the summer of 21 cleaning up these trash dumps and finding evidence of who did it. How do we enforce it? Because there's got to be a mechanism, right?
Yeah, I'll say, right. It requires investigation. It requires either a witness who observed the dumping occur and can identify the person that did the dumping, or it requires, right, if you can pick up, you've got 50 trash bags, they're all the same bag, and you key open one of them and it's got mail to an address, you can say, well, this is probably the guy or gal who did the dumping. But you're still going to have like law enforcement officers going to have to get that information. You're going to have to go find that person. And then I'll say as a former prosecutor, I'm probably going to need that person to admit, yes, I dumped those 50 bags of trash, just because it's going to be very difficult. If we're talking criminal thresholds beyond a reasonable doubt, all it takes is the person whose name is in the envelope to either say, I don't know, I didn't put that in that trash can or that trash bag, or I don't know how all those bags got there. That's not my trash, or that is my trash. I didn't put it there. And if there's any plausible explanation that they didn't, then there's the chance that they are not convicted. And I mean, we can talk all about criminal prosecution philosophy another day, but that's the challenge. And that's very much the real world challenge for the enforcement mechanism.
So if, let's say, for example, someone has a 8-yard Granger dumpster
Sure.
at their building,
Yep.
and they have a camera on it.
Yep.
And they see said person
Sure.
dumping trash. Would that, they would call LPD, LPD would respond. Would that be enough evidence if the person is clearly visible, or a license plate, or, what are we looking for in a video?
I'll pretend I'm not the city attorney for a moment, and I'll be
Okay.
a prosecutor in my youth. I would want,
You're out of your youth?
What's that?
Out of your youth?
I am out of my youth. My beard is sufficiently gray. I want the license plate. I want to know that the person that has that car, I want the license plate, and the person that gets out to match the description of the licensed owner of that vehicle. I would love to know that that person lives alone so that I can't say that that was my roommate or my brother or my sister or whatever. And then again, we would all still need police to go and make contact with that person and get some kind of explanation or story from them. If I had all the resources in the world, I would love for somebody to talk to anybody that knows that person and say, hey, did they drive away from their house with 50 bags of trash on Thursday? And then I see them on the video an hour later on Thursday, dumping it in someone else's dumpster. And if the neighbor says, gosh, yes, it was strange. Lisa left her house with 50 bags of trash in the back of a pickup truck on Thursday. And then this is found. I would issue on those.
And
charges.
if I may,
Please.
we're sort of just talking as attorneys who understand.
Yeah.
We're not speaking on behalf of the Ingham County Prosecutor's
Nope.
Office or the Eaton County Prosecutor's Office,
Correct.
making any statements of, I mean, in our mind, these are sufficient facts in which they could charge. There's
Sure.
also, there's a large degree of prosecutorial discretion, and I just don't want it to even be
Oh, yeah.
interpreted that we're speaking on behalf of
No,
either
no.
of those offices.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. No, I appreciate it.
So it sounds like it's a tricky thing to enforce, and we a lot of times put stickers on dumpsters and things like that, that there's a fine, but realistically, it's hard to prove.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we have to know who the person is that did it. And that's, because that the crime committed beyond a reasonable doubt is easy to prove, right? There's so many cubic yards of stuff and where it ought not be. The question is, who is the human being that did it beyond a reasonable doubt? And that's awful to prove, unless you've got an eyewitness, like, hey, I know that person. They're not supposed to be doing that, or whatever, I know that person, they're dumping all that trash right now.
And do you foresee that there's anything we could do to strengthen the ordinance that we have on the books, much like the sign ordinance we did, where we buy houses, if they put a sign on the corner, tackle that issue?
Interesting. May I think about that? and give
Yes.
an answer back? I hear that. Yeah, I need to think about that.
Okay.
I'll say, I will offer that there's a distinction between the two because there's a clear financial motivation and a line that I can draw back to the person who benefits from having that sign in the right of way that's advertising their business. And it is different from that same connection. It's almost the negative connection that's nobody wants this much trash in their own backyard, but I can't as easily say, so therefore clearly you dumped your trash over here. That's one, a distinction that comes to mind, but I'm happy to look at that.
No, I have no additional questions. Thank you.
All right, then we will move on to item D. I appreciate the discussion.
Sure.
So this is a discussion on the 30 oldest NEAT properties and their status from EDP. We will all received a summary of the oldest 30 oldest NEAT team properties. One correction that we've already discussed. Some of these say referred to council on 12/6 for make safe or demolish. It's actually the 16th. Just grammatical error that it was put into the system. Yeah.
It was a big, left out.
Yeah. So it's the 16th is when we'll get those referrals, just so everyone's aware. Is there anything on here that you can discuss that pops out to you that looking through these gave you a red flag, like, oh, we need to check this out?
Sure. I will say, to your first point, if I did my math counted correctly, there are 5 that of this list that you'll receive on Monday, refer to committee. There's an additional 11342 North Walnut, it's number 16. You've actually already ordered that to be made safe or demolished at your August 26th council. That's a fire damage, so you'll receive a 21-day order. Staff is actively working on that. For knowledge, that property owner did not reach compliance with that, either making it safe or demolishing it. So we'll be moving forward on that internally to complete the demolition through the city's process. So I cover those 6 initially. In my opinion, those come off the list as Again, the latter one I mentioned, that's now we torn down on our end and assessed to the tax roll. The other 5 will be in the purview of the Public Safety Committee moving forward. For the greater 24 that are remaining, I think in general, what we see, I appreciate this exercise. I think, like probably won't be the last time, but I think it's a refresher on our end because it's able to open our eyes to some internal things that should be improved on. But it also, I think, is to show there are homes within here you'll see that have active permitting, and so premise officers, code officers, and ultimately manager support for our office. We do our best on a monthly basis to evaluate these through the need team inspection. That's a cost we assess to the property owner. And we do our best to evaluate those on a monthly basis to determine if additional action needs to be made. And there's multiple steps, right? Every property is unique. And so in some cases, it's likely that some of the 24 remaining will be moved into the MSD process. Certainly if there's active construction work going on, generally past practices that we allow for that work to continue, right? We want the home to be made safe. And so there's a handful of these, as Nicholas and I have been reviewing this list, that are going to be moving forward to MSD. I can't necessarily name those immediately. Partially because what we wanted to give you too is what, when we were in a public forum, is what also is available, should be available to the public through PSNA. And if there's some more follow-up internally, certainly if there's questions that may result in potential pending investigation on our part, whether that's in conjunction with the police department, in some cases, Greg and Lisa's team, we're happy to be in a more confidential setting, talk to you about some of those strategies. Outside of that, council members, I'd be happy to take any direct questions you may have. Again, I apologize. I know you received this at the start of the meeting. So we can either take questions about it now and certainly follow up as well.
Luckily, I went to all these properties.
I know that, yes.
And I think this is great for everybody because this isn't throw you guys under the bus. And when I went to these properties, I think that what I found was, for example, number 29 on here, they've got a full-on Christmas display in their front yard, and the house looks fine. I mean, I think at some point, there was way before you guys, there was some kind of error, something missed.
So something like that, when that happens, and you'll see there are a couple of these where both out of from the notes you shared with us, but also even from our own premise. What you don't see in here is our premise officers do a need team inspection monthly, and they do a note to the file that includes photos. That's not information that's made available publicly, largely because that's part of, in our words, considered an active investigation. Certainly in these cases where, Massachusetts, where you've noted that there may be occupants, our internal notes that as well. But for our part, and I might pass it over to the two across from me, I hope they educate and walk us through what happens when code enforcement believes or suspects somebody may be occupying red tag and how we partner with LPD and outlining some of those processes. But in this case, a couple questions come to our mind when we see something like this, where clearly there's a safety violation. Even just by a simple drive-by, somebody's either maybe occupying it, Christmas decorations is sensibly a giveaway. That doesn't it tells me a couple of things. One, it tells me we need to ask more questions. Because certainly I hope that they're not living in the same house that was tagged unsafe and the reasons why. There's some sewage issues and so forth that resulted in 2016. So it's either they've done no work and they're still occupying a red tag home, which is not allowed, or they've done the work to repair, but they haven't contacted our office, whether that's through pulling permits or at minimum contacting code enforcement to say, I've resolved the problem, come inspect and hopefully remove.
And I think that's the key right there is, some of these places I thought, I'm going to walk up and have some turkey with them because they're beautiful homes. Some of these houses, I think it's just a matter of they didn't take that next step and maybe a little nudge could help.
Some internal things we're strategizing, working on, if there's an open enforcement, we don't see any outreach to our office. We haven't set this in policy yet, but right around 6 months, right? If 6 months go by at an open enforcement, certainly if it's a neat team, we're already inspecting it monthly. But if we don't see outreach, an automatic from our end to resend that notice to remind the folks, hello, there's an open enforcement. Our records indicate you have not contacted our office in case you've done work or something. Again, as a nudge, because some of these, there's concerns that they may be potential rentals and perhaps the tenant is unaware that it's been tagged. Perhaps the landlord made the corrections. But again, unless folks are reaching out to our office and inviting us back in to complete a re-inspect of the original enforcement letter, it's difficult for us to agree that those safety violations have been corrected. It certainly doesn't apply just to the 30 oldest. I know that's kind of where the data set we looked at. That applies to all need. And so forth.
And I think for me, I asked for this, obviously, this is a healthy conversation to have. And, I think city council, I can't speak for the whole council, but we're, willing to do anything to help, get these processes, start bringing down this number. Because, if you, like I said, I drove to each one of these. I would say that half of these could be pulled off this list, looking at the outside. Because some of them, I think, were exterior enforcements.
Yes.
With the proper inspection, that kind of stuff. But, it starts clearing up this list for, you guys, which is just a ridiculously long list at this point.
Right.
And I understand that. Because I think everybody's goal at this table is to have safe housing for the citizens here in Lansing, right? To make sure that it is in fact safe, right?
I will say, because again, they reply to mine, but when we premise officer or report officer comes across a red tag home that we believe there may be an occupant, we do our investigation, whether it's photo evidence, site notes, walking around the property to the extent we can, we can't necessarily go into somebody's backyard and so forth. So there's limitations on where and how we can look. If we see those notations and giveaways, our lights on inside, vehicles, so forth, sometimes neighbors come out and share. We compile those notes and then we work to then notify the Lansing Police Department. It's not, we don't have the purview or authority to, we can knock and ask questions, but we can't enforce in terms of removing folks from the home and so forth. So there becomes a partnership. And we've been fortunate that the Chief Backus and so forth, certainly under my tenure in the last year, Nicholas and so forth, have had a handful of times to renew that effort, renew that partnership. In terms of after we've referred it to them, it's really on the police department to then begin their own investigation as well. And I would imagine if they conclude, and I want to speak for them, in partnership with the city attorney's office, for any more formal action in terms of occupying a red tag property. Add to that, not cover fairly.
Unless there's a question.
Okay. Hello.
Questions?
No, but thank you for explaining that, and thank you for the work that you put into this document. I did make it through about 12 of these in the BSNA, so I did have some of this information, but I did not make it through the entire list. So thank you for providing that. If I have questions based on the information that's here, I will be reaching out.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. I appreciate all your work on this as well. That was the last thing on our.
We did have one member of the public.
I
So just.
did.
If you wanted to.
Belinda, did you want to speak?
Not really, but I am curious about one thing. You've mentioned it before. What should NEAT stand for? Thank you.
Sure. Neighborhood Enforcement Action Teams. Neighborhood Enforcement Action Team.
Neighborhood Enforcement Action Team. Okay, because I've heard say it before. Neighborhood Enforcement Action Team.
And NEAT properties, to go one step further, is property has to be red tagged for 90 days before it can be referred to the NEAT list. Once referred to the NEAT list, it's then assessed a monthly monitoring fee. It's $150, and that covers the cost.
65.
It's
140 and then 25.
Yeah,
So
so 150.
Appreciate the clarification. And that covers, that's the staff time for EDP to conduct that monitoring.
I pay attention. I mean, just kidding. I know you're over.
It was a quiz.
Yeah. This is the last committee on public safety for the year. So I just want to say thank you to the members. This was a great year. Thank you so much for your tough questions, your research, your homework, always being present, being aware of what's going on. Same for Peter, but unfortunately he's out ill. And I want to wish everyone a happy holiday.
Thank you.
Thank you. So if there's no other business, we are adjourned at 4:44.